Once, chants in Latin filled the monumental buildings of Jerusalem. Now, with the Crusaders twice booted from the inland reaches of the Levant, these Latin hymns are replaced by Greek and Arabic. Walking the streets between these churches and mosques, one would see Orthodox and Oriental Christians crowded next to Jews and Muslims, their lives mingling like never before. A fortnight ago, we experienced life for the Armenians and Jews in the southern half of the city and walked about the fortresses of David and Goliath that guard the western wall of Jerusalem. Here, in 1192, with the prosperous and powerful Sultanate of Salah al-Din at its back, the divine sanctuaries of the Holy Sepulchre and the Dome of the Rock beckon us forth. So, summon your bannermen and raise the flags of the cross, star and moon as we continue our tour of Jerusalem in its brand new heyday. I'm Matthew Ryan, Aussie author of the historical fiction series Till Time, and you're listening to There's a Time and a Place for That, Episode 4, On Hallowed Ground, Part 2. As the sun reaches its zenith in the crisp sky high above us, our feet take us through the agricultural markets in the Patriarch's Quarter. South of us is the Citadel of David. West is Goliath's Tower and the farmland beyond, and ahead lies the Christian Quarter. We should take a moment here to buy some snacks for the streets before we resume our tour of Jerusalem. We have a number of very sacred sites ahead of us. Heading off through the crowded souks that form the streets and alleys of Jerusalem, we pass a colourful crowd with rather diverse origins. The Patriarch of Jerusalem lived in a large villa where the open markets now do business, but he has fled to Acre along with the king and queen, and the Latin Patriarch won't return until Emperor Frederick II reacquires the city in 1229 through peaceful diplomacy while under excommunication. Wait, no. The Patriarch at the time refused to cooperate with the excommunicated emperor and placed Jerusalem under interdict, never going there himself. I guess that's what you get when the Pope throws a fit and tells one of the most powerful and capable rulers of the time that he's going to hell, even though he's planning to reclaim the Holy Land and take the throne of Jerusalem as the husband of Queen Isabella. Kids, that's why you shouldn't tell people to go to hell. It might backfire on you. To prove the point, when the Pope later labelled Frederick a heretic and the predecessor to the Antichrist, the emperor marched on Rome, causing the Pope to die from sheer fright. But that's all in the future. For now, the Christian Quarter is overseen by the Patriarch of the Greek Orthodox Church, which is separate to the Pope and his church in Rome. Marcus II, as he is known, lives in a more modest villa up ahead, on our left, as we walk up the street of the Patriarch. But no one cares about that, because on our right, a larger, more interesting building emerges from the crowded streets. From where we stand, we can see a pair of large domes crowned by golden crosses over a long basilica, to the south of which stands a thick bell tower, all built from sandy-coloured limestone. This massive church has to be about 80 metres in length and 40 wide, and is surrounded by a constant flow of people. We are standing near a place of divine sacrifice, where Jesus Christ was set upon his cross to die, and above the cave where his body was laid to rest for 3 days. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a place of utmost importance within the Christian world. Originally built by Constantine the Great 8 centuries ago. It was destroyed in 1009 and rebuilt and renovated by the Fatimids and Crusaders over the following 150 years, bringing it to the shape and size we look upon today. As we walk down the narrow street of the Sepulchre, the roadway running along the southern face of the church, we pass a very different building, still under construction. This mosque stands where the Caliph Umar prayed outside the church back in 637, having refused to pray inside the Christian church in case that set a precedent to use it as an Islamic mosque. He instead knelt on the steps outside, and shortly after, a mosque was built to commemorate this. The original mosque is gone, but Saladin's son and heir has sponsored its reconstruction, albeit in a different place. The entrance to the church was originally on the eastern side, but now it is here, on the southern face of the building, and this is where the mosque is going to be. Past the mosque is the parvis, or courtyard of the church, featuring a row of ancient columns that once held up an arched arcade. The parvis continues around the east side of the basilica, past the Chapel of the Franks, a Crusader-built chapel with a dome painted in a prominent royal blue. On the left, beneath the bell tower, is a baptistry from Constantine's time, which encloses the parvis on the western side. The doors of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre stand before us, on the south face of the church. Two sets of double doors sit in large archways, bordered by 3 columns on either side of the door, while the curved arches above extend up another 6 feet over our heads as we walk through the heavy wooden doors. Further above these arches, along the ledge beneath the windows that let light into the church, is a ladder. But not yet. In 1728, a good few centuries into the future, a wooden ladder is left there by Armenian priests who used the balcony there to rest, get some fresh air, and grow vegetables. The Ottomans, who ruled Jerusalem at the time, taxed the priests every time they left the church, so the clergy came up with the solution of going out the window rather than the door. However, due to an agreement between the 6 denominations that equally controlled the church, no changes could be made without a unanimous agreement by all 6. And so, the ladder remains there in the modern day, but in the 12th century, it is yet to exist. Inside the church, as we continue through the door, the enormous space down the centre of the basilica is held up by monumental arches and columns and ringed by mezzanines. Directly before us is the Stone of Anointing, a slab of stone that is believed to be where Jesus was prepared for burial after his death. Currently, various local Christians and pilgrims are kneeling around it and praying. The church extends left and right, though on the right way it is blocked by an edifice with only a staircase leading to an upper floor. Ahead of us is the open nave of the church beneath the eastern dome. To our left, however, is the rotunda and edicule, which sits beneath the larger western dome. We walk in its direction, emerging into the 25-meter diameter circular room that contains the tomb of Jesus. It is encircled by arches held up by single columns, pairs of columns, and thicker square columns, above which are 2 rows of inset arches, the highest of which displays images of saints. These reliefs, or partly 3D carved figures, look down upon the dodecagonal shrine. Before it stands a square chamber, believed to contain part of the angel's stone that once covered the tomb of Christ. The tomb itself is crowned by a raised dome standing atop columns, mimicking the enormous dome above us. Within this 12-sided chapel is the limestone floor that remains the same from the time of the 1st century, albeit with one new addition. The Crusaders placed a marble slab upon the spot where Jesus was said to be buried, right in the center of this chapel, carved with the sign of the cross. The hill within which this cave would have stood, that is the definition of a cave, after all, has been carved away to reveal the bedrock at the base of the cave, and the church built atop the now level ground. Surrounding this shrine, along the walls of the rotunda, are several altars and chapels, dedicated to Saint Joseph of Arimathea, the man who buried Jesus, Saint Nicodemus, and the 3 Marys. As we stand in this light-dappled space, surrounded by dozens of faithful Christians, we would be forgiven for thinking we could hear some divine voices. We do not. Here, in the holiest place in all Christendom, we are hearing the whispered prayers of pilgrims, speaking in French, English, German, Czech, Polish, Italian, Latin, Spanish, Scottish, Irish, Hungarian, Norwegian, Danish, Greek, Bulgarian, Ruthenian, Syrian, Coptic, and Armenian. People from all over Europe and the Middle East have come to seek salvation at Christ's grave, ignoring the borders that normally separate them and, for once, standing and kneeling side by side as fellow Christians. Returning back to the central nave of the church, we find ourselves beneath the smaller dome known as the Catholicon. This one is only a mere 20 meters in diameter, practically tiny compared to the rotundas, with a large mosaic of Jesus along the curved interior of the dome. This mosaic is in the Byzantine style, which is about as realistic as art gets in Europe at the moment, but it still looks a bit like a child's drawing. Beneath this dome are two chairs. Don't sit in those. They are the thrones of the Patriarch of Jerusalem and the Archbishop. Between them stands a tall, mosaic-covered wall called an iconostasis, a common fixture in Orthodox churches. Directly south is the building within the church that we walked past previously, also having a staircase leading upwards. We ascend and come to the Calvary, otherwise known as Golgotha. Directly to our left is the Greek altar, which is lavishly decorated with golden reliefs of biblical images behind a life-size relief of Jesus upon the cross, flanked by the two Marys. Beneath him rests an exposed rock, over which the altar of the crucifixion is set. This rock is believed to be a part of the hill of Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified, and it naturally rises up to this height above the surrounding church floor. The rest of the hill, which was made of softer dirt and stone, was dug away when the church was initially built. To the south is the Catholic altar, known as the Chapel of the Nailing of the Cross, and beneath all of this is the Chapel of Adam. The progenitor of the human race was supposedly buried beneath Golgotha, and the blood of Jesus sank into the rock and filled his skull when he died on the cross. The rock that extends down through this chapel is also cracked, believed to be caused by the earthquake that followed Jesus' final breath. Beneath that is a small vault used to store relics, known as the Greek treasury. Descending once more into the nave of the church, we head east, coming to the ambulatory. This semicircular end to the church houses 3 chapels and a passage to a 4th. The northernmost niche in this rounded space is the chapel of Saint Longinus, the Roman soldier who stabbed Jesus on the cross and supposedly converted to Christianity following the resurrection, and contains a 3-panel painting of the crucifixion. Next is the chapel of the Division of the Robes, named for the allocating of Jesus' clothing amongst the Roman soldiers, and contains an altar surrounded by a portico made from rust-coloured marble. Third is the Chapel of the Derision, which has a 3-panel painting like the first, but has a marble table over an ancient column as its altar, believed to be the column which Jesus was whipped upon. Next to this last niche is a passage leading down a set of stairs into the Chapel of Saint Helena. She was the mother of Constantine the Great, and a Christian long before her son saw a cross in the sky and converted the Roman Empire. Once he had, Helena led the search for the tomb of Jesus, locating that and what she believed to be the cross he was set upon. This chapel is pretty big, full of columns and vaulted arch ceilings, and a window-set dome, and has an elegant yet simple altar at the far end made from stone, marble, and a gilded inset arch containing a small cross. Beside this altar is a very old chair, one made from simple wood and canvas, said to have been used by Helena when the pious woman sought out the relics of Christ. Along with the cross, she also found the nails used with the cross and the shroud he was wrapped in after death. The apse of this chapel on the south is dedicated to Helena, with paintings of her amongst trinkets left by believers, while the northern apse is for Saint Dismas, the penitent thief crucified on Jesus' right. The walls of these 2 apses are actually Roman-era walls, despite the chapel being constructed only this century, with one originating from the basilica built by Constantine and the other surviving from the time when it was the site of a temple to Jupiter and Venus back in the 2nd century. Interestingly, this chapel was built by Crusaders excavating the ruins around the church, and as such is mostly underground. Above it, surrounding the dome that lets in light, is a large monastery run by Coptic monks called Deir es-Sultan. Christians in Egypt are largely part of the Coptic Church, which was founded by Saint Mark, one of the 4 writers of the Gospels of the Bible, and they were granted the roof of St. Helena's Chapel by Saladin, carrying on the tradition of a Coptic monastery in that spot from when Caliph Abd al-Malik gave it to them back in the 7th century. Most of the chapel roof is open, serving as a continuation of the courtyard out the front of the church, and this courtyard is surrounded by the monastery buildings, such as dormitories, scriptoria, and chapels, some of which butt up against what was once the entrance to the church proper. We exit the church, journeying further down the street we came in on, and past the twin churches of Mary the Great and Mary the Latin. We saw these from the far side of the Hospitallers compound, known now as Muristan. By looking south, we can see the hospital and hostel that once birthed a famed knightly order from a different direction than before. Moving past them, we come to the Syrian Exchange, which sits on the border between the Christian and Muslim quarters. Once, the Muslim quarter was home to as many Jews as the Jewish quarter further south, but once the First Crusade captured Jerusalem nearly a century ago, the district was repopulated with Christian Arabs from modern Jordan and Syria. Now, it acts as the home for many Syrians and Arabs, most of whom are Muslim, and is perhaps the most populated section of the city. Almost immediately, the street running north and south becomes a series of markets and covered souks. The Syrian Exchange, or the Souk Han al-Zit, serves as the shopping district for this half of the city, much like the Latin Exchange directly south. Here, we can find many of the goods that the Middle East was renowned for at this time. Spices from Arabia and South Asia, rice, flour, sugarcane and fruit, silks and ceramics from far-off China, dyes from the coast, ivory from Africa, ambergris from India, and precious metals and gems from all over the place. Trade routes stretched from North Africa out to China, all converging on today's Iraq, at the time known as Sawad. With Jerusalem lying only 900 kilometers west of the monumental city of Baghdad, which, after 1258, would be obliterated by the Mongols, it is little wonder that some traders choose to offload some goods in the Holy Land, especially now that the latest crusade is done and dusted. The people shopping here are not quite as diverse as those in the Latin Exchange, but their robes, dresses and kaftans are a good example of Middle Eastern attire. Designed to keep the wearer cool and protected from the sun in summer and insulated during winter, they are brightly coloured and patterned in a variety of ways, with different forms of silk such as damask and satin, as well as golden thread, adding beautiful accents to the hems and lapels. The crowds are thick and heavy with people bustling about, doing business or seeking out something more leisurely, and it takes us a while to work our way through the network of souks. Not that we mind, it is like a technicolor dream here, with every colour glinting at us while the aromas of 100 spices and perfumes swim around us. For such a warm region, even in autumn, the city streets are also surprisingly cool, the towering buildings and narrow alleys serving to lower temperatures by several degrees. Eventually, we wind our way through the streets north, passing a hostel established by the Hungarian king 200 years ago, the twin churches of the twin saints Cosmas and Damian, who were twins, did you know? A Roman-era triple arch that once marked the entrance to the Forum of Aelia Capitolina, and the now crumbling Church of St. Mary Magdalene. We emerge from the densest urban sprawl of the city at the Gate of Herod, known in Arabic as the Bab az-Zahra. Outside the walls here, we can step back in time to an all-too-deadly era, when an army of zealous peasants and ambitious nobles marched through the Byzantine and Seljuk empires, their eyes set on the crown jewel of the Abrahamic faiths. These crusaders, engaged in the Way of the Cross, as the name translates, made their camp here, at the northern wall of Jerusalem back in June of 1099. We can still see the undulations in the dusty ground where the crusaders set up their lines and dug in for the month-long siege. Once, a wooden cross was set up here, at the spot where Ludolf of Tournai first managed to establish a foothold atop the wall, though this cross is now gone. At this spot, the dream of recapturing Jerusalem, an idea only formed while crusaders were busy pushing Turks out of Byzantine Anatolia in modern Turkey, was put to rest, though not permanently. The recent Third Crusade hoped to retake the city without success. The Fourth Crusade, in 1204, will peter out after the holy warriors of God take Constantinople, the capital of the Christian Byzantine Empire. Weird how Venetian economics and politics took charge of a crusade like that. The Fifth Crusade will sail to Egypt, with no lasting success. We have already mentioned the successful Sixth. The Seventh and Eighth Crusades, led by King Louis IX, keep an eye open for him in the next episode, will also break on Mamluk Egypt, ending with the French king's death by dysentery. The Ninth Crusade is barely worth mentioning, and eventually, all of these dreams for a Christian Jerusalem will fade from the collective European mind. Though under Ottoman rule, a myriad of new churches will be built by European kings in the 17 and 1800s. Returning from the old encampment of the First Crusaders, we delve back into the streets of the Muslim Quarter, making our way south in the direction of the Temple Mount, a massive walled area containing the holiest of Jerusalem's mosques. Before we reach it, we arrive at a collection of church-like buildings along the road towards the Jehoshaphat Gate, known later as St. Stephen's Gate and the Lion's Gate. The western two churches are supposedly at the second station of the cross, which follows the route of Jesus up to his death, though modern research suggests this tradition is incorrect. Rather, the Roman flagstones, which we can see in the street, are of the later form, not the ones mentioned in the Bible. The churches of the condemnation and imposition of the cross and of the flagellation are now a mosque and a stable, respectively, though they maintain their shape. The former, I'm not saying that entire name a second time, is quite a standout structure, likely the reason for its conversion to a mosque rather than a stable. 4 domes surround a central larger one, crowned by little columns holding up a mini-dome, all in bright white stone. Muslim crescent moons are visible atop each of these domes in shiny gold, where crosses once stood. Further along, to the east, we come to 3 large pools. Don't jump in. Again, like with Hezekiah's pool near the citadel, these are used as water reservoirs, though they probably have a fair amount of rubbish dumped in them. The northern 2 pools are actually one body of water, though a dike was built centuries ago to split them in 2. A small church, known as the Church of the Paralytic, is built on one side of the thick dike, and it gives us a hint of what the pool is, or what it is believed to be. Tradition holds that this pool was the one where Jesus miraculously healed an old man rendered an invalid by 38 years of paralysis. This pool of Bethesda, as it was known, prompted the building of St. Anne's Church nearby, in a spot believed to be the home of the Virgin Mary's parents, Anne and Joachim. This church is now a madrasa, an Islamic law school, called Al-Madrasa As-Salahiyah, after the Sultan. It still retains its simple Romanesque shape, with 3 aisles separated by columns, the roof of the central nave higher than the sides, all constructed from elegant limestone blocks. Inside, it is similarly humble, with only a carved scene on the altar as decoration, aside from the requisite vaulted ceilings made to form crosses. Other buildings nearby, right up to the gates, serve as actual classrooms and dormitories, having been converted from a convent and a seminary. Directly south of these, right up against the wall of the Temple Mount, we find the third pool. Made from stone and Roman concrete, it is known as the Birket Israel, though it is often misidentified as the Pool of Bethesda. This massive reservoir measures about 100 meters by 50, and it serves as the moat for the Temple Mount, sitting as it does in the western end of the Kidron Valley between the hill of the temple and the rest of the city. Now, as we stand along the edge of this large pool, our eyes are drawn upward to the sizable wall just south of us. Ever since we climbed to the top of Tancred's Tower at the end of the previous episode, we have surely been eager to visit the glowing rising sun we spotted peeking out from behind these walls. Enclosing an area of 37 acres, these walls surround a place revered throughout all 3 Abrahamic faiths in a way that no other site is. 2,150 years ago, in 987 BCE, Solomon, king of Israel, built a large temple on this site. According to the Torah, Bible, and Quran, God commanded he build a temple there to house the Ark of the Covenant, citing his father David as being unworthy of the task due to the blood he had shed throughout his life. This first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians 370 years later, but a second temple was constructed following the return of the Jews to Israel at the behest of Cyrus the Great. This temple was later rebuilt and expanded upon by Herod, who turned the hilltop into the large walled plaza that it is today. This temple stretched the width of the plaza and rose up to quite a height over the surrounding walls. However, this was also destroyed in turn, this time by the Romans during the Jewish revolt mentioned in episode 1 of this podcast. Following that, nothing was built on the mount until 363, when the Jews were permitted by Emperor Julian to rebuild their temple. According to prophecy, the building of the third temple was to precipitate the coming of the Messiah and the end of the world. Clearly, this prophecy was not to come true just yet, as an earthquake seems to have put a stop to that. Now, as we walk through the Bab al-Hita, the closest gate into the Temple Mount, we see what has been built in its stead. Flowering gardens line the paths in towards the center of the massive plaza before us, interspersed with cypresses, palms, and fig trees. The air is filled with the sound of buzzing bees, the hum of crickets, and the gentle splashing of water from various fountains scattered among the gardens. These elegant and lively plantings fill the northern and eastern ends of the plaza, while the rest of the space is taken up by two very important buildings in Islam. The Jewish temple might be gone, but there is something standing in its place. Known as the Dome of the Rock, we have spied it before. Now we stand scarcely 200 meters from the base of this monumental mosque. We walk towards it, coming upon a staircase leading up, for the dome is built upon a platform 2.5 meters above the surrounding plaza, a space known as a san. The platform is trapezoidal, with one side shorter and another angled from the square made by the remaining two. These more perpendicular sides are 150 meters in length each, giving a total area of no more than 5.5 acres. Another 7 staircases, each having roughly 14 steps, ascend from other points up onto the platform, passing under sets of freestanding arches. Rather than being shaped in the classical Roman style with a perfectly semicircular top, these arches have a slight point to them, reflecting the shape of Islamic domes. As we pass through them, we can see the resemblance in the huge dome atop the mosque. It is shaped somewhat like the top of an egg, crested by a large golden crescent moon, and the entire shape is lined with strips of gold leaf over dark lead, creating a unique contrast. Many years into the future, within our own time for those older listeners, the entire dome will be plated in gold. The King of Jordan, Hussein, funded the new addition using the money he made from selling one of his houses in London. For those living in London, you probably know what an obscene amount of money that must have been. Nevertheless, the 12th century dome is quite spectacular, with the mix of gold and lead seeming to glow from a distance, and the rest of the building is just as much a sight. The octagonal walls are made from marble from the bottom up, while an unimaginably detailed and gorgeous mosaic covers the top half of the 11-meter tall wall, as well as the 9-meter tall cylinder that supports the dome, in a repeating pattern of amber, red, and green tile. From crescent moon to ground, it is 40 meters tall, and with each of its walls measuring 18 meters, the base is 43 meters across from point to point. Around the rim of the octagonal base structure, the mosaic includes tiny white tiles that form the shapes of Arabic letters. These speak of the night journey of Muhammad and his revelations concerning the people of Israel, the progenitors of the Abrahamic faiths of Islam and Christianity via Judaism. In the future, Surah 36 will join this Surah 17 from the Quran, but we would have to wait 400 years for Suleiman the Magnificent, Sultan of the Ottomans, to organize this edition. Ordinarily, this stunning piece of architecture is for Muslims only. In our modern day, entire communities are fighting over the right to even visit. In Salah al-Din's day, it is still an Islamic site of prayer alone, despite the vestige of Solomon's temple beneath it. leaving Jews to worship at the western wall of the Temple Mount. However, we are not here to pray, but to see for ourselves the beauty of this structure, and I'm pretty confident no one can place any restrictions on our imaginations. So, in we go. The first thing we see is the dazzling mix of coloured light that enters through the stained glass windows. All around the outer walls and the drum beneath the cylinder, these colourful windows illuminate the interior with sunlight, making the space seem appropriately ethereal. The outer walls contain an ambulatory, much like the one we found in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, though this one runs the entire circumference of the building. 4 doors give entrance in total, nearly matching the cardinal directions, though there is some slight error. After crossing the 6-metre wide ambulatory, we pass between normal-sized columns and mammoth pillars that line up with the points of the octagonal exterior. These columns and pillars are made of a swirling grey and white marble, looking a little like that marble chocolate you can get, but probably far less tasty. Beyond this ring of columns, we find another much like it, but these do not align with the octagonal walls. They support the dome above and describe instead a proper circle. Passing beneath the arches they hold up, which are patterned in alternating black and white stone, we come to the divine centre of the Dome of the Rock, where we find a rock. I don't know what else you were expecting, it's called the Dome of the Rock. Above is the dome, below is the rock. As we look up, our eyes widen at the sight of the incredible interior of the dome, which is more immediately eye-catching than the rock in the floor. Above a blue and gold mosaic that describes an intricate pattern of spiraling vines and amphorae upon the cylindrical interior of the drum, the dome is covered in gold leaf and blood-red ceramic, in the form of interlocking teardrop patterns. Between these sections, gold Kufic script, a kind of old-fashioned Arabic used for religious purposes, mentions Al-Mamun, the caliph responsible not for building it, but renovating it, though previously the name of Al-Malik was inscribed there to tell of the caliph who ordered its construction. At the very top, gold, red, blue, green and whites intermingle in a design so intricate and fine that we are unable to recognize any pattern or shape beyond the multicolored speckled field that forms a brilliant starscape above our heads. Looking back down, our eyes focus on the floor-level centerpiece of the building. Protruding from the tiles at our feet, the rock for which the shrine is named appears to be an ordinary chunk of limestone, part of the bedrock that plunges up and down across mountain and valley beneath our feet. But it is on this site, according to the Talmud, the collection of rabbinic interpretations that make up the Oral Torah, that God centered the earth and created Adam. The Ark of the Covenant rested upon this so-called foundation stone, and around it Solomon built the first temple. Beneath it, supposedly visible through the hole drilled into it, is the Well of Souls, so don't go sticking your face near it. It is also here that, according to the hadiths of Islam, which serve a similar role to the Talmud, the Prophet Muhammad dreamt of ascending to heaven and speaking with God, from which he received the revelations that kick-started Islam. It is because of this night journey that the Muslims built the Dome of the Rock, to serve as a shrine to God's revelations. Following this dream, until late 623, Muslims prayed in the direction of Jerusalem, in particular this spot. Though it would be 15 years after they switched to Mecca as their Qibla that they themselves would reach and conquer Jerusalem. Even so, this chunk of bedrock is one of the most crucial pieces of Abrahamic religion, and its relevance to these people of faith has brought about conflict countless times before. At least it's surrounded by something exceptionally pretty. Exiting back into the sunshine, though with the bright gold and the many windows in the dome, it hardly feels like we've been away from the open sky, we now face south, towards the second major building on the Temple Mount. As we begin walking in its direction, our eyes go to a smaller structure to the east. Resembling the Dome of the Rock in miniature is an 11-sided domed shrine with only one filled-in wall which faces south-southeast in the direction of Mecca. The exterior is a blue, green and orange mosaic, as is the interior, and the dome is made of lead. Known as the Dome of the Chain, its exact purpose is a mystery, but it was built at the same time as its big brother and sits at the exact center of the Temple Mount, lining up with the center of each of the 4 boundaries of the precinct. Continuing due south, we descend the stairs of the main platform and come upon a cup. Not a teacup, but rather al-kas, which is Arabic for the cup. It is a fountain used for ritual ablutions performed by Muslims before prayer. The faithful use the water to wash their face, then arms, the tops of their heads, and finally their feet. Spigots can be seen along the base of the fountain, lined up with stone stools that are sat on during the process. This one is set up between the Dome of the Rock and the proper mosque of the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, into which we will soon be heading. Maybe take a moment to give yourself a wash, out of respect and also because Jerusalem is pretty dusty. As we move on to the Congregational Mosque of the Temple Mount, we pass by a set of tall cedar trees and find ourselves looking up at a 56-metre wide facade dressed in limestone, topped with an initial gabled roof, and behind that the usual dome, both crowned by moons. The front consists of 5 elegant arches, the central one featuring additional engraved designs along its edge. On either side, an extra wing stretches out, built by the Crusaders. The western wing is reserved for women to pray in, while the eastern side is used as a treasury. The Al-Aqsa Mosque was built at roughly the same time as the Dome of the Rock by Al-Malik and his son and successor, Al-Walid, though the actual construction period is unknown and these reigns are estimates. We walk through one of the 7 doors that line the front, entering the mosque proper, which has 5 aisles running south towards the mihrab, the wall that indicates the direction of Mecca, stretching 83 meters out ahead of us. These aisles are separated by lines of arches made of smooth white marble, though at the center, where the dome sits, a set of 4 curved pendentives rise up. These golden piers stand upon pairs of columns, their tops curving outwards in order to hold up the entire circumference of the dome. The pendentives are decorated with silver roundels, 8-pointed stars, and mosaic patterns of peacock feathers and palm fronds. The floor is carpeted in a rich red and beige, making it soft enough to kneel on, and the air is scented with rose water, a note that is so subtle as to be barely noticeable behind the stronger incense that accompanies it. Gentle prayers sung in Arabic echo throughout the space, making the building hum with an ethereal sensation augmented by the light passing through the stained glass windows. Next to the mihrab, which is a hemi-cylindrical niche in the wall patterned in striped stone with a green stone inscription above it, a small door, followed by a set of stairs, leads up to a pulpit from which an imam can lead prayers and give sermons on Friday. Known as a minbar, it was commissioned by Nur al-Din, Zengid Emir of Syria, and taken by Salah al-Din after his defeat of the young emir who placed here in Al-Aqsa. It is an exquisite piece of woodwork with a Gothic-style facade of ornamental vaulting known as muqarnas, inlaid with mother-of-pearl, ivory and ebony, and carved all over into intricate scrolling patterns called arabesques. The little door and the sides of the pulpit are carved with geometric patterns of stars and octagons. Before this minbar was added to the mosque, before Jerusalem was conquered by Saladin, it served as a royal palace for a time and then the headquarters of the Knights Templar. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ, as they were officially known, were the most visible of the knightly orders in the Levant, and they referred to this as the Templum Solomonus after the biblical king's monumental building. It served as a church, a barracks, and as the offices for the Grand Master of the Order and his lieutenants. Naturally, they are all gone, operating instead out of Cyprus, rather than secretly controlling the Ayyubids and remaining Frankish states as certain video games might suggest. Outside, the sun has begun slinking towards the western horizon, stretching our shadows out ahead of us as we point ourselves east. The golden gate in the wall of the Temple Mount leads us beyond the limits of Jerusalem city, taking us to another mountain not unlike the one we began our tour on in the previous episode. Beyond this mountain is the Judean desert, where Jesus was once tempted by the devil for 40 days. In front of us and to the south, the land is covered in gravestones and mausoleums, some persisting from 2,000 years ago. This has served as the principal burial site for Jews since time immemorial, even after Jerusalem's destruction by Babylonians and Romans. Known as the Mount of Olives, it has an even greater importance than as the biggest Jewish cemetery in the world. Jewish prophecy states that God will stand upon this mountain and split it in two during the apocalypse, and that the rising of the dead, not in zombie form, just in a judgment day let's all go to heaven way, will begin on the Mount of Olives. It is also said that Jesus spent many days teaching his disciples and singing hymns with them on this mountain. A valley separates us from this mount, and as we walk down the slope towards it, we come to the place where Jesus was arrested by the Romans. Known as Gethsemane, it has a small chapel with a grove of olive trees surrounding it. The chapel is built on a Byzantine basilica, both being known as the Church of Agony, for it is believed that this was a location where Jesus meditated before Judas brought the Roman soldiers here to have him arrested, directly leading to his crucifixion. As Luke and Matthew relate, while Jesus prayed amongst the olive trees, he knew of Judas's betrayal and the coming tragedy, and in a moment of human emotion, he grew fearful as he agonized over his fate, hence the name. Technically, it is unknown if this grove is truly Gethsemane, but as far as anyone at this time is concerned, this is it. Moving on from the Church of Agony, we come up the hill towards a prominent tomb. Built over the top of a subterranean crypt is an abbey built by the Benedictine order called the Abbey of St. Mary of the Valley of Jehoshaphat. It is here that, on her death, the Virgin Mary was buried by the apostles. Another tradition claims that she ascended to heaven on this hill, not actually being buried, but the truth is unknown. While the upper half of the church of the abbey has been destroyed and the entire site abandoned, a fresco of Mary surrounded by the apostles, while Jesus looks on from above, is visible through the impressive arched doorway. Stairs, now crumbled beyond use, lead down into the earth, presumably where the sarcophagi of the Queens of Jerusalem are buried alongside the Mother of all Saints. Most, if not all, of the holy sites out here on the Mount of Olives have been torn down or left to crumble by the Ayyubid rulers, who do not see Jesus as anything more than a prophet, and disregard his resurrection and ascension to heaven as myth. Speaking of, as we continue down the dirt road east, we come to the final stop on our tour of Jerusalem. Higher up the slope, an octagonal chapel made from old tan stone is visible. It is partly renovated, thanks to the efforts of Saladin to placate his new Christian subjects, though it sees little use. Built originally by the Byzantines and then the Crusaders, this is what remains of the Chapel of the Ascension. Inside the 12-metre wide building is an inner shrine, 3 meters in radius. The shrine within marks the place where Jesus Christ ascended to heaven following his resurrection, right in front of his remaining apostles. Tradition dictates that his footprints were once found within, but nothing of the sort can be seen now. It is an important spot in Christianity, the last place Jesus touched earth in his life. It is appropriate, then, that our journey ends here, on another mountain outside Jerusalem. We began near the supposed location of the Last Supper, past the place where he was put on trial, visited the site of his crucifixion and burial, and now we stand where he left this mortal coil behind. Whether he was truly the Messiah, as the Christians say, or if he was a prophet as per Islamic tradition, or an impostor brought down by the Jews, looking over Jerusalem as the sun sets, we can recognize how important Jerusalem and its legends are to so many people. With a history stretching back to the end of the Bronze Age, many tribulations have occurred here for Jews, Christians, and Muslims, all linking back to the times of Solomon, David, Moses, and Abraham. As the sun glints off the domes of the temple and the Holy Sepulchre, and shadows stretch out from the citadel and the mighty walls, the city is peaceful. You may note that at no point have I referred to Yahweh, Jehovah, or Allah. Right now, it is just God that looks down upon Jerusalem. Translate that word how you like. Here, all faiths of the book live side by side. In this time and place, there doesn't seem a need for separate names. Thanks for listening to episode 4 of There's a Time and a Place for That. With everything going on at this very moment in Jerusalem and the wider Israel and Palestine, I hope it has been refreshing to explore the city in a more peaceful time. If you enjoyed walking the streets and were awed by the incredible sights of the Holy Sepulchre and the Dome of the Rock, why not share this podcast with your friends and family, and leave a comment as to which places you enjoyed and what you want to see in the future. Your feedback would be much appreciated. If you enjoyed exploring medieval Jerusalem, you might also enjoy reading Till Time, the time-travelling historical fiction series I'm currently writing. Set in various times and places in the past, the books follow best friends Ashton and Imogen as they explore and adventure through the kinds of places visited in this podcast. 2 books are out right now. The Sultan's Siege is set not far from the hallowed ground of Jerusalem, where our heroes are caught between the Crusaders and Ayyubids as they fight to get back home. The Frankish field has them join forces with a royal assassin as they fight against spies and kings to keep all of European history from being wrenched apart. More books are on their way, but for now, you can find these first 2 installments on Apple Books, Google Books, Amazon Kindle, Kobo, and Barnes & Noble. Links to all of these can be found through the link tree in the description of this podcast. Thank you for listening to There's a Time and a Place for That, On Hallowed Ground, Part 2, and I'll see you next time.